She smiled and said, "Welcome back," like this was my neighborhood again. But this woman who'd publicly slapped me in the parking lot as my moving truck pulled away now sat in the community clubhouse as if nothing had happened. No one outside the HOA knew the wounds I'd buried. They saw only a normal suburban street with perfectly trimmed lawns and identical mailboxes. But this time, I wasn't the young homeowner trapped in silence. I'd come prepared, and I would return every fine, every insult, not with complaints to the board, but with the one thing she couldn't control, the truth. My name is Emily Parker, and at 34, I'd built a life I thought was bulletproof against the past. Senior project manager at a tech firm in Denver, 6-figure salary, corner office with a view of the Rockies, all the markers of success that were supposed to mean I'd escaped the HOA hell of Lakewood. But trauma has a way of finding you. Even 16 years later, I was 18 when I left, not with a goodbye party and promises to visit, but fleeing the absurd rules and the tyrant who enforced them with an iron fist wrapped in pastel cardigans. The memory still plays in vivid detail. My hastily packed U-Haul, the moving driver's concerned glance in the rearview mirror, and then the sound of the truck door slamming behind me as Karen Whitmore, the HOA president, caught up in the community parking lot. "You ungrateful little rule breaker," she'd snarled, her hand connecting with my face so hard I tasted copper. The slap echoed off the asphalt while neighbors peeked from curtains, pretending to water flowers that were already perfect under her 2.5-inch grass mandate. The moving driver had started to get out, but Karen turned on him with that fake polite smile she wore like armor. "HOA business, dear. Drive away now or I'll cite your vehicle for unauthorized parking." And the driver did, tail lights disappearing into the Denver twilight as my cheek burned and my escape route vanished. But something else left with that truck. My fear. In its place, a cold fury took root. "Get back to your property," Karen commanded, her voice dropping to that dangerous register I knew too well from 3 years of her tyranny. No. That single word cost me. She grabbed my arm, fingers digging into flesh, and I still have a faint scar where her thumbnail broke skin. But I didn't move. Couldn't. If I went back into that neighborhood, I'd never leave alive, maybe not physically, but in every way that mattered. "Linda," she barked at my mother, who stood 10 feet away, arms crossed, watching. "Talk sense into your daughter." She finally spoke, her voice as flat as her expression. "Emily, don't make this harder than it needs to be." Harder for whom? I wanted to scream. "For you, who chose this woman over your own daughter, who looked the other way when violation notices piled up on my door for offensive holiday lights that stayed up one day too long, who told the neighbors I was a troublemaker going through a phase." Instead, I yanked my arm free and ran. Not gracefully, not like in movies. I stumbled in my worn sneakers, my duffel bag banging against my hip, Karen's curses following me into the night along with her favorite threat, "We'll lien your house for unpaid fines." I ran until my lungs burned, then walked until I found another strip mall and a payphone. This was 2008, and my phone was sitting on my dresser at home, forgotten in my escape plan. My best friend's older brother picked me up 3 hours later. He drove me to his apartment near the university, let me crash on his couch, and never asked questions about the swelling on my face. The next day, I found a job waiting tables. Within a month, I had 3 roommates and a mattress on the floor of a studio apartment. Within a year, I'd earned my GED and enrolled in community college. The whole time, my mother called, left voicemails that progressed from angry to pleading to resigned. "She's not a bad woman," she'd say. "You just bring out the worst in each other with your attitude toward the covenants." As if I was equally responsible for a grown woman's obsession with finding people for political flags or basketball hoops visible from the street. As if owning a home was my contribution to our toxic HOA dynamic. I changed my number, moved apartments, transferred to a 4-year college, and threw myself into computer science with the dedication of someone running from something, which I was. Every achievement, every promotion, every successful project launch was another brick in the wall between me and that house in Lakewood. My colleagues knew me as Emily Parker, the composed project manager who never missed deadlines and mediated conflicts with ease. They didn't know that I'd learned to read microexpressions from years of gauging Karen's moods, trying to predict when a normal board meeting would explode into a rant about community standards. They didn't know I kept my apartment minimalist because I'd learned to be ready to leave at a moment's notice. They didn't know I still mapped exit routes in every room I entered. The Christmas parties were the hardest. Watching intact families, seeing neighbors who didn't fine each other into bankruptcy, mothers who protected instead of enabling the tyrant. I perfected the art of deflection when asked about my own neighborhood. "Oh, we're not close," I'd say with a practiced smile. "Different states. You know how it is." But Denver isn't a different state from Lakewood. It's 30 minutes on I-25. Close enough that I sometimes had nightmares about running into them at a King Soopers or a Broncos game. Close enough that I'd driven past the exit for my old neighborhood countless times, my hands tightening on the wheel, my foot pressing harder on the accelerator. I built my life in opposition to everything that neighborhood represented. Where Karen demanded chaos with her ever-changing rules, no flags over 3 days, grass exactly 2 inches, no visible trash cans, I created order. Where my mother chose weakness and board votes for Karen, I chose strength. Where they fed on drama and control through special assessments and public shaming, I cultivated peace and independence. My apartment became my sanctuary. Clean lines, soft colors, everything in its place. No raised voices, no walking on eggshells, no apologizing for existing. Therapy helped, though it took me years to admit I needed it. Dr. Martinez, a soft-spoken woman with knowing eyes, helped me understand that my hypervigilance was PTSD, that my workaholism was a coping mechanism, that my difficulty trusting wasn't a character flaw, but a survival tool that had outlived its purpose. "You're not responsible for your mother's choices," she told me during one session, "or for managing Karen's emotions. You were a young homeowner. I was 18 when I left," I countered. "You were young for most of it," she said gently. "And 18 is still very young to be facing that alone." Alone. That word followed me through my 20s and into my 30s. I dated, but never seriously. Friends got close, but not too close. I was functional, successful, even happy in my carefully constructed way, but always alone in the ways that mattered most. So when my phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon, displaying an unknown Colorado number, I almost didn't answer. Something instinct maybe, or that hypervigilance that never quite faded, made me pick up. Emily, my mother's voice, older now, rougher. "It's Mom." 16 years collapsed in an instant. I was 18 again, running through a dark parking lot, Karen's handprint burning on my cheek. "How did you get this number?" "It wasn't easy." A pause. "Emily, I need you to come home. Karen is sick." The words hung between us, weighted with expectation in her world. This was how it worked. Crisis erased history. HOA obligation trumped personal safety. Forgiveness was assumed rather than earned. "No," I said, proud of how steady my voice remained. "You don't understand. It's cancer. Stage 4. The doctors say." I said, "No. She's changed. Emily, the diagnosis." This made her reflect on things. "She wants to make amends." I laughed. A sharp sound that surprised us both. Amends. Did she use that word or did you? Silence. "Then we need help. I can't manage everything alone. The HOA meetings, the medical appointments, the insurance. Hire someone with what money? Everything's going to medical bills. Please, Emily." Whatever happened in the past? Whatever happened? The fury that had been dormant for years roared to life. She terrorized me. She fined me out of my own home. You watched. That's what happened. You were a difficult resident. I hung up. My hands shook as I set the phone down. But my mind was clear. Some bridges were meant to stay burned. But she called again and again. Different numbers. The house phone. Karen's cell. Numbers I didn't recognize. I blocked them all. But voicemails found their way through. Each one more desperate than the last. Painting a picture of mounting medical debt. A neighborhood falling apart under endless special assessments. A woman overwhelmed. I should have felt nothing. I wanted to feel nothing. Instead, a plan began forming in the back of my mind. Not forgiveness. Never that. But something else. Something that tasted like justice delayed but not denied. The life I'd built in Denver was everything that neighborhood in Lakewood wasn't. My apartment on the 15th floor overlooked the city with floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded the space with light. No dark corners. No closed doors hiding secrets. Just clean open space where I could breathe. My morning routine was sacred. Up at 5:30 yoga on the balcony as the sun painted the mountains gold. Coffee from the expensive machine I'd bought to celebrate my last promotion. By 7, I was at my desk at Tech Forward Solutions reviewing project timelines and preparing for the day's meetings. Structure, control, peace. Emily, you killed it in the Morrison presentation yesterday. Jake, one of my team leads, said as he passed my office. The client was eating out of your hand. I smiled, the professional mask sliding easily into place. Team effort. Your analytics sealed the deal. This was my world now. Clean conference rooms where voices never rose above professional disagreement. Lunch meetings at upscale restaurants where the biggest drama was whether to order the salmon or the chicken. Colleagues who respected boundaries and never asked why I didn't have family photos on my desk. The Denver tech scene had exploded in recent years, and I'd ridden that wave expertly. My LinkedIn profile read like a success story. Consistent promotions, glowing recommendations, speaking engagements at industry conferences. I'd even been featured in a Women in Tech article for a local magazine, though I'd carefully edited my background to exclude anything before college. My evenings were equally curated. Spin class on Mondays and Wednesdays. Book club on Thursdays. We were reading leadership memoirs. Nothing too personal. Saturdays were for hiking the numerous trails within an hour's drive. Losing myself in the physical challenge and mountain air. Sundays I meal prepped and reviewed the coming week. Every hour accounted for, every moment productive. I dated occasionally, carefully selected men from my professional sphere who understood that work came first, and deep emotional connections weren't on the table. Mark, the latest, was a software engineer from a competing firm. We had dinner twice a month, attended industry events together, kept things light and uncomplicated. You're like a fortress, he'd said once, not unkindly after I deflected another question about my childhood neighborhood. Beautiful and impressive, but impossible to get inside. I'd taken it as a compliment. My savings account grew steadily. Investment portfolio diversified. Credit score excellent. I had spreadsheets for everything. Financial goals, career milestones, even social obligations. If you could measure success in metrics, I was winning. The company happy hours were exercises in performance. I'd nurse a single glass of wine, laugh at the right moments, share sanitized anecdotes that revealed nothing real. When conversations turned to family holiday plans, aging parents, childhood memories, I had a repertoire of redirections. Your mom must be so proud, Sarah from HR said once after I'd landed a particularly challenging client. Do your parents live nearby? East Coast, I lied smoothly. We're not particularly close. Different values. You know how it is. She'd nodded sympathetically, probably imagining political differences or religious conflicts. Something normal, something that didn't involve HOA fines that were never appealed, and public shaming documented only in my memory. Travel became my escape within my escape. Business trips to San Francisco, Austin, Seattle, each city a reminder that I could exist anywhere, be anyone. I collected hotel room keys like talismans, proof that I wasn't trapped. Weekend trips to places Karen would never go, art museums, wine tastings in Napa, meditation retreats in Sedona. My therapist and I had worked through what she called hyperindependence. It's a trauma response, Dr. Martinez explained. When you can't trust others to meet your needs, you learn to need nothing from anyone. That sounds like strength to me, I'd countered. It can be, she agreed. But humans are social creatures. Connection isn't weakness. Still, I kept my connections surface level. Work friends who knew my coffee order, but not my middle name. Gym buddies who spotted my weights but never asked about the scars. Neighbors who smiled in the elevator but didn't have my phone number. The Lakewood of my memories felt like another planet. Sometimes I'd Google Earth the old neighborhood, zooming in on the small ranch house with its brown roof and dying lawn under Karen's no brown spots rule. The HOA signs still loomed like sentries. The tree I used to climb had been cut down for safety compliance. I wondered if anyone remembered the girl who used to live there. The quiet one who got good grades and never caused trouble until she did. The one who disappeared one spring night and never came back. Did they create stories about where I'd gone? Did Karen tell them I was a rule breaker, a troublemaker, dead to the community? My LinkedIn notifications were constant, recruiters reaching out, former colleagues congratulating me on work anniversaries, invitations to speak at conferences, each one a small validation that I'd made it, that the girl from Lakewood was gone, replaced by Emily Parker, senior project manager, thought leader, success story. The company promoted me to director level on my 33rd birthday. The announcement email went out to all staff. Cake in the break room, champagne toast. My team had decorated my office with balloons and a banner reading "Boss Lady." I smiled and laughed and gave a speech about teamwork and vision. That night, alone in my apartment, I'd stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Designer clothes, professional makeup, expensive haircut, no trace of the 18-year-old with a swelling cheek and torn sneakers. I'd won. Hadn't I? Escaped, thrived, built a life so far removed from Karen's reach that I might as well exist in a different universe. The call from my mother shattered that illusion. One unknown number, and suddenly I was 18 again. The carefully constructed walls showed their cracks. The fortress Mark had described revealed its foundation of sand. But I'd handled it, blocked the numbers, refused the request, maintained the boundary. Dr. Martinez would be proud. I was proud. This was what healing looked like. The ability to say no, to choose my peace over their crisis. Still, the voicemails kept coming. I stopped listening after the third one, but their existence nagged at me. Red notification badges that I couldn't bring myself to clear. Evidence that no matter how far I ran, how high I climbed, that neighborhood in Lakewood still had a claim on me. Work became my refuge again. I threw myself into a massive system integration project, the kind that required 18-hour days and weekend sessions. My team groaned, but I thrived on the intensity. No time to think about anything beyond code reviews and deployment schedules. You're going to burn out, Jake warned after finding me in the office at 2 a.m. for the third time that week. Whatever you're running from, it'll still be there when you slow down. I'm not running from anything, I said automatically. I'm running toward big things. He'd given me a look that said he wasn't buying it, but didn't push. That's why I valued my professional relationships. They knew when to back off. The project launched successfully. Bonuses were distributed. The CEO called me out by name in the quarterly all-hands meeting. By every metric that mattered in my carefully controlled world, I was at the top of my game. So why did I feel like I was suffocating? The dreams started again. Not nightmares exactly, those I could handle. These were worse, dreams where I was in that neighborhood. But it was beautiful. Where my mother smiled with genuine warmth. Where Karen was just a normal neighbor who helped with yard sales and didn't enforce rules with glee. I'd wake from these feeling displaced, unsure which version of reality was true. My apartment, once a sanctuary, began to feel like a prison of my own making. The minimalist aesthetic I'd cultivated looked sterile. The careful schedules felt suffocating. The professional relationships seemed suddenly hollow. Success, I was learning, was a poor substitute for peace. Then came the call that changed everything. Not from my mother this time, but from a number I recognized. My cousin Diane, who I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. "Emily, I'm sorry to call like this," she said without preamble. "But I thought you should know. Your mom's in the hospital. She collapsed. They're saying it's exhaustion, malnutrition, maybe. She's been trying to take care of Karen alone with all the HOA stuff." And the rest of her words faded into white noise. My mother, the woman who had watched Karen humiliate me and done nothing, who had chosen the HOA over me every single time, who had enabled and excused and minimized until I had no choice but to run. She was in the hospital, and despite everything, I felt the pull. Not love that had died long ago, not forgiveness that wasn't mine to give, but something else. Something that tasted like opportunity. "Emily, are you there?" "I'm here," I said, my voice steady despite the plan already forming in my mind. "Which hospital?" Because suddenly I understood. I hadn't built this life in spite of them. I'd built it for this moment. Every skill I'd learned, every connection I'd made, every dollar I'd saved, it was all ammunition. And after 16 years, I was finally ready to return to the battlefield. Not as the frightened teenager who'd run into the night, but as Emily Parker, Director of Technology Solutions, the woman who fixed broken systems for a living, and the neighborhood in Lakewood was just another broken system waiting to be solved. The drive from Denver to Lakewood took 28 minutes. I timed it, not because I'd ever made the journey before, but because I'd mapped it obsessively over the years. The way you might trace an old scar. I-25 south to 6th Avenue. Exit at Kipling. Turn left. Simple directions to a complicated past. I sat in my Tesla in the hospital parking lot for 10 minutes before going in. The December air was sharp. Snow threatening in the heavy clouds. My hands were steady on the steering wheel. My breathing controlled. Every meditation technique Dr. Martinez had taught me deployed like armor. The Lutheran Medical Center looked different from how I remembered it. Expanded. Modernized. The last time I'd been here was for a broken wrist when I was 16. Karen had accidentally shoved me during a discussion about my lawn decorations. Though the official story was that I'd tripped on a curb, I wondered if they still had those records. My heels clicked against the polished floor as I approached the information desk. The volunteer, an elderly woman with kind eyes, smiled at me. "I'm looking for Linda Parker's room," I said, the name feeling foreign on my tongue. "Are you family?" "I'm her daughter." The words cost me something, but I kept my expression neutral, professional. This was just another project, another problem to solve. The volunteer gave me the room number and directions. 3rd floor, East Wing, cardiac unit. The elevator ride felt endless and too quick simultaneously. When the doors opened, I was hit by that distinct hospital smell. Disinfectant failing to mask something deeper. Illness, desperation, the same cocktail that had perfumed that neighborhood in my memories. I found her room easily. The door was partially open, and I could hear voices inside. My mother's, weak but recognizable, and hers, Karen, that rumbling voice that used to make me freeze like prey. For a moment, I was 18 again, hand on a doorknob, deciding whether to run, but I wasn't that girl anymore. I straightened my shoulders, adjusted my designer handbag, and knocked. "Come in," my mother called. I pushed the door open and stepped into their world for the first time in 16 years. The first thing I noticed was how small they looked. My mother, propped up in the hospital bed, had aged decades. Her once blonde hair was gray and thin, deep lines carved into her face. She looked fragile, used up, exactly like someone who'd spent 16 years managing a tyrant's HOA empire and personal illness. Karen sat in the visitor's chair, and the change in her was even more dramatic. The woman who'd loomed so large in my nightmares was shrunken, hollow. Cancer had eaten away at her bulk, leaving sharp bones and loose skin. An oxygen tank sat beside her, tubes running to her nose. Her hands, which had once left bruises on my arms during enforcement visits, trembled with a slight palsy. But her eyes were exactly the same, cold, calculating. They found me immediately, and her lips curved into that smile I remembered. "Welcome back," she said. The same words from my nightmare scenarios. But her voice was weaker now, breathier, less lion, more jackal. "Emily," my mother breathed, and I saw tears start immediately. "Oh, Emily, you came." I didn't move from the doorway. "Diane called, said you were sick." "Just exhaustion," she said quickly, glancing at Karen. "I'm fine. It's nothing." Always minimizing, always protecting her. Even now. "The doctors don't think it's nothing," I said, keeping my voice clinical. "Malnutrition, dehydration, classic caregiver burnout." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Speaking of caring, where have you been for 16 years while your mother needed you in the HOA? There it was, the first shot fired. I almost smiled. She was so predictable. "Building a life," I said simply. "One where I don't get fined for existing or slapped for questioning absurd rules." My mother flinched. Karen's jaw tightened. "Still dramatic. I see," she said. "Some things never change." "No," I agreed, finally stepping into the room fully. "Some things don't." The room was small, cramped, standard hospital-issue beige walls, fluorescent lights, the constant beep of monitors. A get-well card sat on the bedside table. Just one. Either they had no friends or no one cared enough to pretend anymore. "How long has she been taking care of you alone?" I asked Karen directly. She bristled. "That's between us." 3 years, my mother interrupted softly. "Since the diagnosis, and the HOA still managing that alone." 2. "We manage fine," Karen said. But my mother's silence told a different story. I could see it now, the full picture, her getting sicker, meaner, my mother getting more exhausted, more isolated, the perfect storm of codependency and decline under the weight of endless board meetings and secret assessments. "I should go," I said after a moment. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay." "Wait." My mother struggled to sit up straighter. "Please, we need to talk. There's so much." "I have a meeting," I lied smoothly. "But I'll come back." Karen snorted. "Sure you will." I looked at her then, really looked at her. This woman who had terrorized my teenage years, who had made me feel small and worthless and afraid with her public citations and neighborhood gossip. She was dying badly, painfully, and she was taking my mother down with her. "Actually," I said, surprising all of us, "I will tomorrow. We should discuss your care situation." "We don't need," Karen started. "You do." I cut her off using my director voice, the one that shut down arguments in boardrooms. "You clearly do. Mom's in the hospital. You can barely breathe without assistance. Whether you want to admit it or not, Your current approach isn't sustainable. My mother was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. Maybe she hadn't. The Emily she knew wouldn't have talked back, wouldn't have taken charge. But that Emily was gone. Had been for years. I'll be back tomorrow at 10 o'clock, I announced. We'll discuss options. I left before they could respond, my heels clicking that same determined rhythm down the hall, back in the elevator, through the lobby, into the parking lot where the winter air hit my lungs like freedom. I sat in my car again, engine running, heat blasting. My hands were shaking now, adrenaline finally catching up. But underneath the familiar anxiety was something new, purpose. I drove to the neighborhood. I hadn't planned to, but my car seemed to navigate there on its own. The neighborhood looked tired, worn down. Houses that had been middle class, respectable in my youth, now showed signs of neglect, peeling paint, overgrown yards. The American dream in decline under Karen's endless special assessments for emergency repairs that somehow never happened. The house, their house, never mine, looked worst of all. The lawn was dead, even accounting for winter. The gutters hung loose. One of the front windows was boarded up. A ramp had been hastily built over the front steps. Clearly a DIY job for Karen's wheelchair. I parked across the street, remembering all the times I dreamed of coming back here in my fantasies. I was always triumphant, pulling up in an expensive car, check. Wearing designer clothes, check. Successful beyond their wildest dreams, check. But sitting there, I felt none of the satisfaction I'd imagined. Just a hollow ache for the girl who'd lived in that neighborhood, who'd believed it would always be her prison. My phone buzzed. An email from Jake about tomorrow's sprint planning. The normal world calling me back. I could drive away now. Block their numbers again. Let them figure it out themselves. It would be so easy. Instead, I opened my laptop and started researching Medicare policies, caregiving resources, elder law attorneys in Colorado, financial assistance programs, power of attorney procedures, and, most importantly, HOA bylaws and Colorado statutes on embezzlement and fiduciary duty. By the time the sun set, I had a comprehensive understanding of their likely situation and the leverage points within it. Because I'd realized something in that hospital room. They thought I'd come back as their victim, desperate for their approval or forgiveness. They had no idea I'd returned as something far more dangerous. A woman with resources, with connections, with 16 years of built-up equity in the Bank of Justice. My phone rang. Dr. Martinez, right on time for our weekly session. How are you, Emily? She asked in her gentle way. I'm in Lakewood, I said. At the neighborhood. A pause. How does that feel? I looked at the boarded window, the broken ramp, the dead lawn, evidence of decay, of karma, maybe, or just the inevitable result of two toxic people slowly poisoning each other with no one left to blame. Like I'm exactly where I need to be, I said. And for the first time in 16 years, I meant it. I arrived at the house at exactly 10 the next morning. My mother had been discharged late yesterday against medical advice, but with Karen's insistence. I'd watched from my car as a medical transport van delivered them home, Karen barking orders from her wheelchair while my mother struggled with bags and oxygen equipment. The front door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there looking even more fragile in daylight. She wore the same style of shapeless house dress I remembered, though this one hung loose on her diminished frame. You came, she whispered like she couldn't quite believe it. I said I would. The house smelled exactly as I remembered. Stale cigarette smoke, though supposedly Karen had quit years ago. Underneath it, something medicinal and sour, disease mixed with the faint odor of old HOA violation notices. The living room had been converted into a makeshift command center. Karen's recliner positioned for optimal TV viewing of neighborhood security cams. Medical equipment cluttering every surface. Pill bottles lined up like soldiers on the coffee table next to stacks of HOA ledgers. Karen was already in position, wearing a ratty cardigan that had seen better days. The queen on her throne, even if the throne was now a worn recliner with a portable oxygen concentrator humming beside it. "The prodigal resident returns," she said, not looking away from the TV where a local news segment blared too loud about HOA scandals. I stood in the center of the room, cataloging changes. Same beige carpet, more stained now. Same wood paneling. A few new holes poorly patched, probably from thrown remote controls during board arguments. The couch where I'd done homework while they plotted new rules in the kitchen. The corner where the community holiday tree went when we bothered. Every piece of furniture a monument to misery. "Could you turn that down?" I asked, nodding toward the TV. "It's my house," Karen said automatically. "I'll watch what I want, how I want." There it was, the same control tactics, the same need to establish dominance over the smallest things. But where once her voice would have risen to a roar, now it wheezed out, punctuated by a coughing fit that left her gasping. My mother rushed to her, adjusting her oxygen, fetching water, hovering with practiced anxiety. I watched the choreography of their dysfunction, noting how she anticipated her needs before she voiced them, how she flinched when Karen raised a hand to take the water glass. "So," I said when the coughing subsided, "let's discuss the situation." "There's no situation," Karen managed between breaths. "We're fine." I pulled out my phone and opened the notes I'd made. According to public records, the HOA is 3 months behind on maintenance fees. The association has $47,000 in liens from medical debt and unpaid vendor contracts. Mom was hospitalized for malnutrition and exhaustion. You require round-the-clock care that she physically cannot provide. That doesn't sound fine to me. My mother sank onto the couch looking stricken. "How do you know about public records?" I repeated. "It's all accessible if you know where to look." Karen's face darkened. That familiar storm brewing. "You've been spying on us." "Research," I corrected. "I'm a project manager. I assess situations and develop solutions." "That's what you wanted, isn't it? Help." "We don't need your help," she spat. "Then why did Mom call me 16 times in the last month?" Silence. My mother twisted her hands in her lap. Karen's jaw worked like she was chewing something bitter. "Here's what I see," I continued, keeping my tone professional. "Two seniors in crisis, too proud or too stuck to accept assistance. Mom's killing herself trying to be a full-time caregiver and board secretary. You're getting sicker, meaner, more demanding. The neighborhood is falling apart with uncollected dues and crumbling sidewalks. The bills are piling up. This ends one of 3 ways. Mom's complete breakdown, your death, or the entire HOA dissolving in lawsuits. Maybe all 3. "How dare you?" Karen started. But another coughing fit cut her off. This time I didn't wait for my mother to respond. I fetched the water myself, holding it out to her. She looked at the glass like it might be poisoned, then at me with those calculating eyes. "You think you're so superior," she wheezed after drinking, "with your fancy job and your expensive clothes. But you're still the same selfish brat who abandoned her mother and the community." "I left," I said calmly, "because you slapped me, because you fined me out of my home, because Mom let you, because staying would have killed me. Maybe literally. You were out of control," she shot back, the old narrative spinning up, questioning every rule, talking back at meetings, disrupting our perfect neighborhood. I was a teenager, a normal homeowner trying to exist in an abnormal situation. You made everything a battle. You made it a battle. Her voice cracked, trying to achieve the old volume. Always challenging me, always pushing. "Karen, please." My mother interjected weakly. "Your blood pressure." "Shut up, Linda." And there it was, the mask slipping. My mother shrank back, and I saw myself at 15, 16, 17, trying to become invisible, failing. "Don't talk to her like that," I said quietly. Karen's eyes snapped to mine. "This is my neighborhood. I'll talk however I want." "Your neighborhood?" I pulled out a folder from my bag. "Actually, according to these documents, the house is in Mom's name. Has been since 2018 when you transferred the deed to protect it from medical creditors. So, technically, it's her house. You're a guest." The silence was deafening. Karen's face went from red to purple. My mother looked between us like a spectator at a tennis match, unable to follow the ball. "You little—" "I'd be very careful how you finish that sentence," I interrupted. "I'm not 18 anymore. I'm not scared, and I have a very good lawyer who would love to discuss elder abuse, financial exploitation, and what happens when a caregiver can no longer provide adequate care, plus HOA fiduciary breaches." It was a bluff mostly, but they didn't know that. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. My mother made a small sound. Maybe protest, maybe relief. I pressed on. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to help, but on my terms. Mom, you need respite care. Karen, you need professional help, not just what Mom can provide. The HOA needs repairs and audits. The finances need sorting. And everyone needs to accept that the current situation is untenable. We can't afford—" my mother started. "I'll handle it," I said. "Consider it 16 years of missed birthdays and Christmases." Karen found her voice. "We don't want your charity. It's not charity. It's an investment in Mom's health and keeping you out of a state facility, which is where you'll end up if she collapses again." I let that sink in. State facilities. The great fear of the prideful poor. Karen had always acted like she was above everyone, better than the neighbors, superior to anyone who'd accept handouts. The idea of ending up in a Medicaid bed, surrounded by other people's poverty, would be her worst nightmare. "Why would you help us?" my mother asked softly. "After everything." I looked at her, really looked, saw the woman who'd chosen a tyrant over her own daughter, who'd stood by while public humiliation played out in this very room, who'd gaslit and minimized and enabled until I had no choice but to save myself. But also the woman who'd taught me to read, who'd made Halloween costumes from scratch when money was tight, who'd had dreams once before Karen systematically crushed them with board votes. "Because I can," I said simply. "And because watching you both destroy each other won't heal what happened here." Karen turned back to the TV, cranking the volume up, dismissing me, or maybe just needing the last word, even if it was silence. My mother walked me to the door, moving slowly, carefully. "Emily," she said quietly, "I know you hate us, hate me, but I'm glad you're here." "I don't hate you, Mom." It was true. Hate required energy I'd stopped spending on them years ago. "I just learned to live without you." She flinched but nodded. "Will you really come back?" "Tomorrow," I promised. "We'll start with getting you some help. Home health aid. Maybe someone who can be here while you rest. Karen won't like a stranger in the house. Karen will adjust." I paused at the threshold, looking back at the house that had been my prison. "She doesn't have a choice anymore. Neither of you do." I left them there in their toxic bubble. But for the first time, I felt like I'd punctured it. Just a small hole, but enough to let in air. Enough to begin changing the atmosphere. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. Jake asking about a code review. The normal world still spinning. I sent back a quick response, then sat for a moment, processing. Phase 1 was complete. I'd established presence, assessed the battlefield, set terms. They thought I was there to help out of obligation or guilt. They had no idea I was documenting everything, building a case, preparing for the real confrontation. Because helping my mother was just the beginning. The real goal was something Karen would never see coming. Accountability, legal, financial, and personal for 16 years of abuse and its ongoing effects on the entire neighborhood. I'd learned in the corporate world that the best revenge wasn't emotional or violent. It was procedural, systematic, devastating in its thoroughness. And I was very good at systems. The transformation began that night. What had been simmering fear in my chest crystallized into something harder, sharper, purpose. I sat in my Denver apartment, laptop open, legal pad beside me, mapping out my approach like I would any complex project. But this time the deliverable wasn't a software launch or system integration. It was justice. My phone sat on the coffee table, recording app open. I discovered it by accident during a particularly tense client meeting. My phone had been recording in my pocket, catching every word. Now I tested it deliberately. Crystal clear audio. Even from inside my purse. Colorado was a one-party consent state. Only one person in a conversation needed to know it was being recorded. That person would be me. I created a new cloud folder, encrypted and password protected, Lakewood Project. Inside subfolders, financial records, medical documentation, audio files, legal research, HOA bylaws violations, everything organized, cataloged, timestamped. Evidence was only as good as your ability to present it. The next morning, I arrived at the house with supplies. Not the helpful daughter items they expected, casseroles or cleaning supplies. Instead, I carried a discreet digital recorder, a notebook designed to look like a day planner, and my phone with the recording app ready. My mother answered the door looking marginally better. She'd showered, changed clothes, small victories. I made coffee, she offered tentatively. Thanks. I followed her to the kitchen, noting the dishes piled in the sink, the overflowing trash, the expired food visible in the open refrigerator. Where's Karen sleeping? She had a bad night. The pain medication makes her groggy in the mornings. Perfect. I needed to establish patterns, and starting with my mother alone was ideal. We sat at the kitchen table, the same scarred wooden surface where I'd done homework while they screamed about new finds in the kitchen. I pulled out my planner, clicking my pen. Let's talk about what you need, I said. Phone recording from my purse. Walk me through a typical day. She did, and it was worse than I'd imagined. Up at 5 a.m. to check Karen's oxygen. Medications every 2 hours, some requiring precise timing. Helping her to the bathroom because her pride wouldn't allow a bedside commode. Cooking special meals she'd then refuse to eat. Changing sheets daily because the medications caused night sweats. HOA board meetings where she had to lift Karen's wheelchair in and out of their ancient van. When do you sleep? I asked. I catch naps when she's watching the security cams. She said it like it was normal, like running herself into the ground was just what bored allies did. And when she gets angry, when she yells, she stiffened. She's in pain. The cancer. It changes people. Was she different before the cancer? Silence. We both knew the answer. I made notes, keeping my expression neutral while internally documenting every excuse, every minimization. Mom, I said carefully. Has she ever threatened you physically? Emily, please. She's dying. Can't we just... I need to know what I'm walking into, I pressed. If I'm going to help, I need the full picture. Has she hit you? She looked away. Not recently. She can't really. Too weak. Not recently, meaning she had when she could. I wrote it down. A sound from the living room. Karen's chair creaking. She was awake. Linda, where's my medication? My mother jumped up immediately. That trained response. I followed, observing their morning dance, her barking orders from the chair. But now I noticed details I'd missed before. How my mother stayed just out of arm's reach. How she flinched when Karen raised her voice. how she positioned herself between her and any throwable object. "You're late with the pills," she growled, then noticed me. "What are you doing here so early?" "Helping Mom," I said smoothly, "making sure she has what she needs." She snorted. "What she needs is to do her job without whining about it." I pulled out my phone, pretending to check messages while ensuring the recording app was still running. Her job, I thought. Board Alliance was a partnership. "Don't start with that feminist crap," she said, struggling to sit up straighter. "A wife, or in this case, a loyal board member, takes care of her president. That's how it works." Even when the president never took care of the neighborhood, her eyes narrowed. "You don't know anything about our HOA. I know what I saw growing up. You saw a spoiled brat who needed discipline. I saw a woman who slapped her resident, who terrorized her community, who's still doing it, just from a wheelchair now." My mother made a distressed sound. Karen's face went that dangerous shade of red. "Get out," she wheezed. "Get out of my house." "Mom's house," I corrected. "And I'm not going anywhere." She grabbed the nearest object, a pill bottle, and threw it at me. Her aim was off, weakness betraying her, but the intent was clear. The bottle hit the wall behind me and scattered pills across the floor. "Karen," my mother cried, dropping to her knees to collect the medication. I didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there, phone recording everything, watching her reveal herself. "You always were a cold bitch," she spat. "Just like your real father. Worthless. Abandoning your mother when she needed you." "My father died when I was 10, I said evenly. "Which you knew when you started befriending my vulnerable, grieving mother, just like you knew she had a life insurance payout that mysteriously disappeared after you moved in on the board." Silence. My mother's hands stilled on the floor. "What are you talking about?" she asked quietly. "Dad's life insurance," I said, not taking my eyes off Karen. $50,000. I was supposed to get it for college. Remember? But somehow after you came along, there was nothing left, and the HOA emergency fund suddenly had unexplained deposits. "That money went to household expenses," Karen said quickly. Too quickly. "Whose household?" "Because I remember eating ramen 5 nights a week while you had a mysteriously new car and the HOA bought new security cameras." My mother was looking at Karen now, something shifting in her expression. Not quite suspicion, but the first crack in her willful blindness. "You said there was no money," she said slowly. "You said Tom hadn't left anything." "There wasn't. It was..." Karen was scrambling now. "Christ. Linda, you're going to believe her over me after everything I've done for you." "What have you done for her exactly?" I asked. "Besides isolate her from her family, besides spend her first husband's money, besides turn her into your unpaid board secretary while skimming dues. I gave her a home. She already had a home. You moved into it. I gave her stability. You gave her bruises and fines. I saw them. The neighbors saw them. Everyone knew. But nobody said anything because that's how it works. Isn't it? The nice community leader who's a monster behind closed doors." She lunged forward in her chair, reaching for me, but the oxygen tube pulled taut and yanked her back. She sat there, gasping, fury making her whole body shake. "You vindictive little..." The coughing fit that followed was violent, productive. Blood spotted the tissue she held to her mouth. My mother rushed to her, but for the first time I saw hesitation in her movements. Not quite reluctance, but a pause, a fraction of a second where she chose to help rather than reacting automatically. "Progress. I think we're done for this morning," I said, sliding my phone back into my purse. "Mom, think about what you really need, not what she tells you to need. Don't you dare come back," Karen wheezed between coughs. "I'll call the police." "Please do," I said. I'd love to explain to them why a cancer patient is throwing things at visitors, why her caregiver is malnourished, why the HOA books look like a crime scene. I'm sure Adult Protective Services and the Colorado HOA Oversight Board would be very interested. The coughing stopped even through her rage. Karen understood threats. She'd made enough of them over the years. I left them there. My mother still kneeling on the floor, surrounded by scattered pills. Karen slumped in her chair, looking somehow smaller than when I'd arrived. But I didn't go far, just to my car, where I immediately backed up the audio file to 3 different cloud services. Then I called the home health agency I'd researched, set up an assessment for later in the week, called a cleaning service, scheduled for tomorrow, started the wheels turning on getting my mother help, whether Karen wanted it or not. Because I'd realized something important during that confrontation. Karen was still the same abusive, controlling woman she'd always been. The cancer hadn't changed her. It had only limited her reach. But my mother, there was something there. A flicker of doubt. A crack in the facade. It wasn't forgiveness I was after. It wasn't even revenge exactly. It was something more complex. I wanted my mother to see her clearly without the filters of fear and dependency. I wanted her to understand what she'd chosen, what it had cost us both. And I wanted Karen to know in her final days that she'd lost not to cancer, but to the 18-year-old girl she'd driven from this neighborhood, the one who'd come back not as a victim, but as her reckoning. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Please come back tomorrow. Please. I would, with more recordings, more evidence, more cracks in their toxic foundation. The scared girl who'd run from this neighborhood was gone. In her place stood a woman who understood that the best revenge wasn't served cold. It was served with documentation, witnesses, and legal precedent. And I was just getting started. You need to be careful, Rachel said, sliding into the booth across from me at the downtown Denver coffee shop. Women like that, when they're cornered, they get dangerous. Rachel Winters had been my colleague for 3 years before I learned we shared more than just a talent for project management. She'd escaped her own Karen, though hers had been a boss, not an HOA president. Now she worked with a nonprofit helping domestic abuse and HOA victims navigate the legal system. She can barely walk, I said, warming my hands on my latte. What's she going to do? It's not about what she can do physically. Rachel's eyes were serious behind her glasses. It's about what she might do legally, financially. These tyrants are cockroaches. They survive everything, and they know how to work the system. I pulled out my tablet, showing her the files I'd compiled. 3 days of recordings, photos of the house's condition, medical records I'd convinced my mother to share, financial documents showing years of questionable HOA transactions, unexplained special assessments funneled into personal accounts. Rachel scrolled through, her expression growing more focused. This is good. Really good. But you need more than evidence of past abuse. You need proof of current abuse or neglect and HOA embezzlement. She threw a pill bottle at me. On recording, audio only. You can hear the impact. Her shouting, my mother's distress. That might work. She pulled out her phone. I'm going to connect you with Marcus Thompson. He's an attorney who specializes in elder abuse, financial exploitation, and HOA law. He owes me a favor. While she made the call, I thought about the last 3 days. I'd visited the house each morning, always with my recorder running. Karen's behavior had escalated predictably. More verbal abuse, more thrown objects, more threats about revoking your mother's board position. But my mother was changing, too. Tiny rebellions, taking an extra moment to fetch her pills, forgetting to buy her preferred brand of cigarettes, the ones she wasn't supposed to have anyway. Marcus can see you tomorrow at 2, Rachel said, hanging up. Emily, I need you to understand something about what you're doing. It's admirable, But it's also dangerous. Not physically, but emotionally. Going back to that neighborhood, confronting your abuser, it can re-traumatize you. I'm fine. That's what we all say. She reached across the table, touched my hand. I said it, too. Right up until I wasn't. Have you told your therapist what you're doing? I hadn't. Dr. Martinez thought I was maintaining healthy boundaries, protecting my peace. She had no idea I was deliberately walking back into the war zone. I'll tell her next session, I lied. Rachel studied me. You're not trying to save your mother, are you? Because you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. I'm not trying to save her. It was mostly true. I'm trying to give her options. Show her that Karen isn't untouchable. That she has more power than she thinks. And if she chooses her anyway, I'd asked myself the same question every night, staring at my ceiling at 3 a.m. What if I presented her with freedom and she chose captivity? What if the trauma bond ran too deep? Then at least I'll know I tried, I said finally. And I'll have protected her assets from Karen, even if I can't protect her. Rachel nodded slowly. Okay, but promise me if it gets to be too much, you'll walk away. You've built a good life. Emily, don't let her destroy it from her deathbed. After she left, I sat in the coffee shop surrounded by normal people living normal lives. A couple laughed over shared pastries. A businessman typed frantically on his laptop. A mother bounced a baby on her knee. None of them knew that across town, in a decaying house in Lakewood, a different reality existed. One where community meant control and neighborhood meant fear. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. She's having a bad day. Maybe don't come tomorrow. I stared at the message, reading between the lines. Bad day meant violent mood. Don't come meant she was afraid for me, or for herself, or afraid of what I might see. I texted back, I'll be there at 10 o'clock. Have the cleaning service coming at noon. 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times. Finally, she won't like strangers in the house. She'll adjust, I replied, echoing my earlier words. That night, I couldn't concentrate on work. The Morrison project needed attention. But my mind kept drifting to that neighborhood. I found myself Googling things I'd never thought to search before. Adult children of narcissistic leaders, trauma bonding in HOA alliances, financial abuse warning signs in community associations. Every article felt like reading my own history. The isolation tactics, the gaslighting, the way tyrants systematically destroyed their victims' support networks until they had nowhere to turn. My mother had been a widow with a young daughter and a life insurance payout, the perfect target for a predator like Karen. I pulled up old photo albums I digitized years ago. Pictures from before Karen. My mother smiling, genuinely smiling. Me on my father's shoulders. Block parties with extended family who mysteriously stopped visiting after Karen took the presidency. We'd had a life, a good one, before she poisoned it. On impulse, I searched for one of those relatives. My mother's sister, Aunt Diana, who used to babysit me. She tried to maintain contact after Karen arrived, but she'd driven her away with accusations and manufactured drama. Your sister's trying to turn Emily against the board, she'd rage, until my mother chose peace over family. I found her on Facebook living in Fort Collins now, less than an hour away. Her profile was public, filled with photos of grandchildren, garden projects, a life fully lived. I stared at her face, older now but still kind, and wondered if she ever thought about us. Before I could lose my nerve, I sent a message. Aunt Diana, this is Emily Parker. I know it's been a long time. She responded within minutes. Emily, oh my God, sweetie, I've thought about you so often. Are you okay? Is your mother okay? We exchanged messages for an hour. She told me how Karen had threatened her, accused her of trying to steal from the HOA. made such a scene at community gatherings that everyone eventually stopped inviting them. She tried to stay in touch, but my mother had begged her to stop calling. Said it only made things worse. "I should have fought harder," she wrote. "I should have called the oversight board. Done something. I'm so sorry. You couldn't have known," I typed back, though part of me wondered if that was true. How many people had seen the signs and chosen comfortable blindness? "Is she still?" She trailed off. "She's dying," I told her. "Cancer. Mom's her caregiver. It's bad. Can I help? I could visit." "Not yet," I said quickly. "But soon. Maybe. I'm working on something." We exchanged phone numbers. Promised to talk soon. Another ally. Another witness to the truth Karen had worked so hard to bury. I went to bed that night feeling something I hadn't expected. Hope. Not for reconciliation or happy endings, but for something simpler: validation. Proof that I hadn't imagined it all. Hadn't been the difficult resident Karen painted me as. The next morning, I arrived at the house early, before Karen would be fully awake. My mother met me at the door, and I saw immediately that she'd been crying. Her left eye was swollen. Not quite black, but heading there. "She didn't mean to," she said quickly, seeing my expression. She was reaching for her water and... "Stop!" I held up my hand. "Just stop. We both know she meant to." She crumpled then, shoulders shaking. I guided her to the kitchen, away from the living room where Karen's snores rattled through the walls. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "But I can't leave her. She's dying." "Emily, what kind of person abandons a dying woman?" "The kind who's been abused for 20 years, I said gently. "The kind who deserves to live whatever time she has left in peace. You don't understand. The house, the bills, everything's so tangled up, and she'd never agreed to." "Let me worry about that," I interrupted. "Just tell me if you could leave safely. Would you want to?" She looked at me then. Really looked at me. And for the first time in 16 years, I saw my mother. Not Karen's ally, not her enabler, but the woman who'd raised me alone after my father died. Who'd been strong once before Karen systematically broke her down with board votes and guilt. "Yes," she breathed, the word barely audible. "God help me." "Yes." I squeezed her hand. "Okay, then trust me. Can you do that?" She nodded, tears flowing freely now. From the living room, Karen's voice bellowed. "Linda, where's my breakfast?" My mother started to rise automatically, but I held her back. "Let her wait. The cleaning service will be here soon. Let's make a list of what you'd take if you could leave. Important documents, medications, anything sentimental." "She'll never let me." "She won't have a choice," I said firmly. "I've got a lawyer. We're going to do this right, legally. She can rage all she wants from that chair, but she can't stop us." For the first time since I'd come back, my mother smiled. It was watery and uncertain, but it was there, a crack in the prison walls, letting light in. "Linda," Karen's voice was getting angrier. "Don't make me come in there." We both knew she couldn't. Not without help. The empty threat hung in the air, defanged by her own weakness. "Let me make you some tea," I said to my mother loud enough for Karen to hear. "We've got planning to do." And we did. While Karen raged from her chair, while my recorder captured every threat and curse, my mother and I sat at the kitchen table and began plotting her escape. Felt like something out of a movie, except this was real. This was happening. The scared 18-year-old who'd fled this neighborhood would have been proud, but I wasn't doing this as her anymore. I was doing it as the woman she'd become. Methodical, strategic, and absolutely determined to see justice served. The cleaning service arrived at noon as promised. Karen's protests were drowned out by vacuum cleaners and the sound of change coming. Whether she liked it or not, the house had secrets buried in every corner. I discovered this when my mother, emboldened by our kitchen conversation, led me to the basement while Karen dozed in her chair. "I haven't been down here in years," she whispered, clicking on the single bulb that cast shadows across stacks of boxes. "She keeps everything locked up. But I found a key." The basement smelled of mildew and something else. Old paper. Maybe fear. Metal filing cabinets lined one wall. Padlocked. Cardboard boxes towered in unstable columns. A desk sat in the corner, its surface covered in dusty folders. "What is all this?" I asked, though I was already forming theories. "Her papers." She said it was tax stuff. Told me never to touch it. My mother hovered at the bottom of the stairs, ready to flee. "But after what you said about the life insurance," I approached the desk carefully, using my phone's flashlight to read folder labels. Tax returns 2010 to 2015. Medical records. Bank statements. And then jackpot HOA ledgers. "Keep watch," I told my mother, opening the folder. Inside, I found exactly what I'd suspected. My father's life insurance policy dated 3 months before his death. Beneficiary Linda Parker with myself as secondary. Payout $75,000. Not the $50,000 I'd remembered, but clipped behind it was another document. A withdrawal form dated 6 months after Karen moved in on the board. The entire amount liquidated into an HOA emergency fund under Karen's control. "Mom," I said quietly, "come look at this." She crept over and I watched her face as she processed the betrayal. $75,000. Money my father had scraped together working overtime, wanting to ensure we'd be okay if anything happened to him. Gone. "She said there was nothing," she whispered. "Said Tom must have let the policy lapse." I took photos of every page, then moved to the next folder. More revelations. A second mortgage on the house my mother didn't know about. Credit cards in her name she'd never applied for. Medical bills that should have been covered by insurance marked paid, but with no proof of payment. And special assessments funneled straight into Karen's personal account. "Emily, hurry," my mother urged. "She doesn't sleep long anymore." But I was already opening the filing cabinet with bolt cutters I'd brought from my car. Inside, more evidence of financial manipulation spanning decades. Karen had been systematically draining the HOA treasury while maintaining complete control. She'd even taken out loans against community reserves. "This is fraud," I said, photographing everything. "Multiple counts. Federal crimes." "I signed things," my mother said weakly. "She always said it was for our future, for security. Signing under coercion isn't consent, and forging signatures is definitely illegal." I pointed to several documents where my mother's signature looked suspiciously different. "Did you sign these?" She shook her head slowly. "I don't remember." Maybe she'd bring me papers when I was cooking or tired. A creak from upstairs made us both freeze. Then Karen's voice, calling for my mother. She looked at me with panic, but I held up a hand. "Go," I said. "I'll be up in a minute. Tell her you were looking for holiday decorations." She fled up the stairs while I quickly photographed the most damaging documents. Loan applications with falsified income, investment accounts drained without authorization, even a will dated last year, leaving everything to Karen, with my mother's signature that looked nothing like her actual handwriting. By the time I emerged from the basement, my phone held enough evidence to put Karen away for years if she weren't already dying. But that wasn't the point. The point was leverage. "What were you doing down there?" Karen demanded from her chair. The smell of urine was strong. She'd needed the bathroom while my mother was with me. "Helping Mom find Christmas decorations," I said smoothly. "Though it looks like you've been using the basement for filing. Quite the extensive record-keeping." Her eyes sharpened despite the medication haze. "You stay out of my office." "Your office?" "In Mom's house." I pulled out a folder I'd brought upstairs. Interesting filing system. Especially these investment accounts in Mom's name that she doesn't remember opening, and the HOA dues that magically appeared in your personal account. The color drained from her face. Those are private. We're private, I corrected. Now they're evidence. Evidence of what? She tried for bluster, but I heard the fear underneath. Your mother's terrible with finances. I've managed everything for years. Kept us afloat. By stealing her dead husband's life insurance. By forging her signature on loan documents. By hiding assets while claiming poverty. I held up my phone. I've documented everything, Karen. Every fraudulent transaction. Every forged document. Every penny you stole from the HOA treasury. She lunged forward, reaching for my phone, but the oxygen tube yanked her back. She sat there gasping, rage and terror roaring on her face. You can't prove anything, she wheezed finally. It's been too long. Statute of limitations. Actually, financial elder abuse and HOA embezzlement have extended statutes in Colorado, and the federal charges for mail fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, those are still very much prosecutable. I'd done my homework with Marcus Thompson the day before. But here's the interesting part. Dying doesn't make you judgment-proof. Your estate can still be held liable. Any assets you've hidden, any accounts you've squirreled away, they can all be seized. My mother stood frozen in the doorway, watching this reversal of power with something like awe. What do you want? Karen asked finally, deflating into her chair. Justice, I said simply. But I'll settle for the truth. A full accounting of every penny you stole, every document you forged, every asset you've hidden. And if I refuse, then I turn everything over to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division tomorrow morning. You'll spend your last months being interrogated by federal agents. Your name in the papers as an HOA embezzler and elder abuser. Is that how you want to be remembered? She looked at my mother then, expecting her to intervene, to take her side as she always had, but she stood silent, straight-backed for the first time in years. Linda, she said, her voice taking on that manipulative wheedle I remembered. Baby, you know I only ever tried to take care of you. Everything I did was for us. No, my mother said quietly. Everything you did was for you. It was the first time I'd ever heard her contradict her directly. Karen's mouth opened and closed, genuinely speechless. I pressed my advantage. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to provide a full accounting of all finances, every hidden account, every fraudulent transaction. You're going to sign documents returning control of all assets to Mom, and you're going to do it voluntarily, or I'll make sure your obituary includes the word fraud prominently. This is extortion, she spat. This is consequences, I countered. Something you've avoided for 20 years. The rest of that afternoon was a careful dance. Karen, realizing she was cornered, tried every manipulation tactic in her arsenal. Rage gave way to self-pity, then to bargaining, then back to rage. But I held firm, my phone recording every moment, the evidence from the basement backing up every accusation. By evening, she'd cracked. Faced with the prospect of public humiliation and legal action, she began revealing hidden accounts. A safety deposit box at a bank across town. An investment account under her sister's name. Cash hidden in the garage rafters. The total was staggering. Over $200,000 stolen and hidden over 2 decades from HOA dues. My mother sat at the kitchen table, tears streaming down her face as the full scope of the betrayal became clear. This wasn't just financial abuse. It was psychological warfare designed to keep her dependent and afraid. I trusted you, she whispered to Karen. I defended you. I chose you over my own daughter. Don't be dramatic, she started. But my mother cut her off. I lost my daughter because of you. 16 years gone. Because I believed your lies. Mom, I said gently, I'm here now. We can't get those years back. But we can make sure the remaining ones are different. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Then she did something I'd never seen before. She walked over to Karen's chair, looked her straight in the eye, and said, "I want a divorce, from the board and from you." The words hung in the air like a bomb detonation. Karen's face cycled through emotions. Shock, fury, disbelief. "You can't divorce me," she said finally. "I'm dying." "Then we'd better hurry," she replied. And for the first time in 20 years, I saw the woman my father had fallen in love with. Strong, determined, free. I smiled, pulling out my phone to call Marcus Thompson. We had documents to draft, assets to recover, and a future to reclaim. The scared girl who'd fled this neighborhood 16 years ago had returned as a woman who understood that the best revenge wasn't emotional. It was systematic, thorough, and absolutely legal, and we were just getting started. The board meeting was called for Saturday afternoon. Karen had insisted on it, demanded her fellow members and their spouses witness what she called my mother's betrayal. She thought she was summoning reinforcements. She had no idea she was assembling an audience for her own downfall. They arrived in waves. Karen's older ally, Dennis, a contractor who'd always turned a blind eye to the bruises and fines. Her younger supporter, Paul, the successful one who lived in Cherry Creek and rarely visited. Their spouses, who'd long ago stopped inviting us to community gatherings. My Aunt Diana, who'd driven down from Fort Collins at my invitation, the wild card Karen hadn't expected. "What's she doing here?" Karen demanded from her chair, pointing a trembling finger at my aunt. "I invited her," my mother said quietly. "She's my sister. She has a right to be here. It was her house, her rules now." The power shift was subtle, but seismic. They arranged themselves uncomfortably in the living room. The medical equipment had been pushed aside to make space, but Karen's oxygen tank still hissed its constant rhythm. She dressed for the occasion, actual clothes instead of the ratty cardigan, her hair combed, trying to project the authority she'd once wielded so easily. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice stronger than it had been in days. "I've asked you here because Linda has lost her mind. This situation needs community intervention." "What situation would that be?" Dennis asked, looking uncomfortable already. "She wants to divorce me, from the board, while I'm dying after 20 years of service because Emily has filled her head with lies." All eyes turned to me. I sat beside my mother, manila folders in my lap, phone recording from my purse. I dressed carefully, professional, but not intimidating, the kind of outfit that said successful resident rather than vengeful prosecutor. "They're not lies," I said calmly. "They're facts. Would you like to see the evidence?" "Evidence of what?" Paul interjected. He'd always been the peacemaker, the one who smoothed things over. "Karen's sick. This hardly seems the time for whatever this is." "Evidence of 20 years of financial abuse," I said, opening the first folder. "Fraud, forgery, theft. Everything Karen has done to systematically destroy my mother's financial security and the HOA treasury while enriching herself." "That's ridiculous," Dennis scoffed. "Karen's taken care of the neighborhood all these years." "Has she?" I pulled out copies I'd made of key documents, passing them around. "Here's my father's life insurance policy. $75,000 meant for my mother and my education. Here's the withdrawal slip. 6 months after Karen moved in on the board. Here's where that money went, into an account in Karen's name only." Silence as they examined the papers. Paul's wife, a lawyer herself, leaned forward with interest. "And here," I continued, "are the credit cards Karen opened in my mother's name without her knowledge. The second mortgage she tricked her into signing. The forged signatures on loan documents. The investment accounts she drained, and the HOA dues funneled into her personal accounts. You can't prove any of this," Karen said. But her voice had lost its commanding tone. Actually, I can. I pulled out my phone, connected it to the smart TV they'd never learned to use properly. I have recordings. Would you like to hear Karen admitting to the thefts? Or perhaps the one where she throws things at me and threatens violence? This is a private community matter, Dennis said quickly. We don't need to play it, Paul's wife said quietly. If there's evidence of elder abuse and HOA embezzlement, we need to hear it. I played a selection of recordings. Karen's voice filled the room, alternately raging and wheedling, the sound of objects being thrown. My mother's distressed crying. Her admissions about the money pulled out during our confrontation 3 days prior. Dennis's wife covered her mouth in shock. Paul looked sick, but it was Aunt Diana who spoke first. I tried to tell you all, she said, looking at Karen's allies. 20 years ago, I tried to warn you. She isolated Linda systematically, cut her off from family, from friends. You all said I was causing drama. Diana, that's not. Dennis started. Yes, it is. She cut him off. You knew something was wrong. We all did. But it was easier to believe Karen's version, wasn't it? That Linda was fragile, needed managing, that Emily was a problem resident who needed discipline. I was never a problem, I said quietly. I was a straight A student, never in trouble at school. My only crime was existing in Karen's neighborhood and refusing to be silent about the abuse. Abuse is a strong word, Paul said uncomfortably. I stood then, rolling up my sleeve to show the small scar on my forearm. This is from when she grabbed me so hard her fingernail broke the skin. I was 17. I pointed to my jaw. I had bruising here for 2 weeks after she backhanded me for talking back, which meant asking why Mom was crying. I was 16. My mother made a sound, half sob, half apology. I touched her shoulder gently before continuing, but the physical abuse was nothing compared to the psychological warfare, the constant criticism, the gaslighting, making me feel worthless, crazy, unwanted in what should have been my home. And you all let it happen because Karen was charming when she wanted to be. Because it was easier to believe her lies than deal with the ugly truth. That's enough, Karen wheezed. But no one was listening to her anymore. It's not nearly enough, I countered. Should we discuss the present situation? Mom's in the hospital for malnutrition and exhaustion because she's been killing herself caring for her. Meanwhile, she's hidden away over $200,000 while claiming the HOA can't afford help. $200,000. Dennis's voice cracked. Karen, is that true? Karen's silence was damning. Here's what's going to happen, I said, taking control of the room like I did in boardrooms. Mom is filing for divorce from the board and from any alliance with Karen. Karen is going to return all stolen assets. She's going to sign documents admitting to the financial abuse, and she's going to do it voluntarily, or I turn everything over to the authorities Monday morning. You can't threaten, Dennis started. It's not a threat, Paul's wife interrupted. It's a gift. Criminal prosecution for elder abuse and HOA fraud would mean Karen spends her last months in legal proceedings. This is actually merciful. Merciful? Karen spat. After everything I've done for this community, what have you done exactly? Aunt Diana asked. Besides destroy a widow and orphan who were grieving, besides steal their money and security, besides turn this neighborhood into enablers and accomplices. The room erupted in arguments. Then Dennis defending his ally out of habit. Paul trying to find middle ground that didn't exist. Their spouses whispering furiously. And through it all, Karen shrinking in her chair, her carefully constructed image crumbling before an audience of her own choosing. Finally, my mother stood. The room fell silent. Everyone turning to look at the woman they'd written off as weak for 2 decades. I've made my decision, she said, her voice steady. I'm divorcing Karen from the board and from any tie. I'm reclaiming what's mine. And anyone who has a problem with that is welcome to leave my house. Linda, be reasonable, Dennis started. I've been reasonable for 20 years, she interrupted. I was reasonable when she spent my first husband's life insurance. Reasonable when she isolated me from my family. Reasonable when she drove my daughter away. I'm done being reasonable. She looked at Karen then, and I saw no love in her eyes, no pity, just exhaustion and resolve. You're going to sign whatever papers Marcus Thompson puts in front of you. You're going to return every penny, and then you're going to find somewhere else to finish dying because you're not doing it in my house. The silence that followed was deafening. Karen's mouth opened and closed, but no words came. For the first time in 20 years, she had nothing to say. This is elder abuse, she finally managed, throwing out a dying woman. No, Paul's wife said firmly. This is consequences. Something you should have faced a long time ago. One by one, the board members stood to leave. Dennis muttered something about needing to think. Paul squeezed my mother's hand and whispered an apology that was 20 years too late. Their spouses hugged her. Promised to call, to visit. Promises that might actually be kept now. Aunt Diana was the last to go. She embraced my mother for a long moment, then turned to me. I'm so proud of you, she said. Your father would be too. She saved herself, I corrected. I just showed her it was possible. After they left, the three of us sat in silence. Karen in her chair, deflated and defeated. My mother on the couch looking simultaneously exhausted and energized. Me standing by the window, watching the last car pull away. What now? Karen asked finally, her voice small. Now you sign the papers, I said. Now you make things right. Now you face what you've done. And if I refuse? I smiled then, not kindly. Then I make those recordings public. Every community friend, every neighbor, everyone at the senior center where you used to play cards, they all get to hear exactly who Karen Whitmore really is. Your choice. She closed her eyes and for a moment I almost felt pity. Then I remembered the bruises, the tears, the 16 years of exile. Pity evaporated. I'll sign, she whispered. Victory should have tasted sweeter. Instead, I just felt tired. But my mother was smiling. Really smiling. And that made everything worth it. The war wasn't over. There would be lawyers, paperwork, logistics to sort out. But the battle, the one that started when I was 18 and running through a dark parking lot, that battle was won. And Karen knew it. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. Not through my actions. I'd kept my promise to stay quiet if Karen cooperated. But through Paul's wife, Margaret. She'd been more disturbed by the board meeting than anyone realized. And she happened to serve on the board of a local senior advocacy group. Financial elder abuse and HOA corruption. A hidden epidemic in Colorado, read the headline in the Denver Post. The article didn't name names, but the details were specific enough. A Lakewood community, a 20-year pattern of financial exploitation, a dying president who'd hidden assets while her caregiver struggled in poverty. Local senior centers were buzzing with speculation by noon. My phone rang as I sat in my office reviewing contracts. Marcus Thompson, the attorney. Have you seen the paper? He asked without preamble. Just now. This wasn't me. I know. Margaret Sandoval called to give me a heads up. She felt ethically obligated after what she learned. Emily, this changes things. Karen's going to be under public scrutiny now. She might dig in harder. But Marcus was wrong. The public exposure, limited as it was, broke something in Karen. When I arrived at the house that afternoon, she was in her chair. The newspaper spread across her lap, tears streaming down her face. They know, she kept saying. Everyone knows. My mother sat across from her, unmoved by her tears. She'd cried an ocean over the years. Her tears were too little, too late. "You did this to yourself," she said simply. "The senior center called," she continued, her voice broken. "Said I'm no longer welcome at poker nights. Dennis won't answer my calls. The neighbors are talking. I can see them through the window whispering, pointing at the house." I felt a savage satisfaction. This was what she'd feared most. Not legal consequences, but social humiliation. The careful image she'd cultivated for decades, shattered in a single news cycle. "Sign the papers," I said, placing the stack Marcus had prepared on her TV tray. "Complete financial disclosure, transfer of all hidden assets, agreement to vacate the house within 30 days. Sign them, and this ends quietly. Refuse," and Margaret promised a follow-up story with names this time. Her hand shook as she reached for the pen. "Where am I supposed to go?" "There's a care facility in Aurora," my mother said. She'd done her research, found a place that accepted Medicaid, wasn't too far from her doctors. Even now, even after everything, she couldn't quite let go of all concern. "They have an opening. A nursing home," her voice cracked. "You're putting me in a home." "You're putting yourself in a home," I corrected. "Actions have consequences. Karen, you're just not used to facing them." She signed page after page, her signature getting shakier but never stopping. Asset transfers, divorce papers, admissions of financial misconduct. With each signature, 20 years of control slipped away. While she signed, I pulled my mother aside. "Are you sure about this, her leaving? I mean, you don't owe her anything." "But I'm sure," she interrupted. "I've wasted 20 years feeling obligated, guilty, afraid. I won't waste another day." The next week passed in a blur of activity. Adult Protective Services opened an investigation prompted by the newspaper article. They interviewed my mother, reviewed the evidence I'd gathered, validated what we already knew: Karen had engaged in systematic financial exploitation. Their report would be crucial if she tried to contest the divorce. The hidden bank accounts were transferred. The safety deposit box opened, revealing not just cash, but bonds, jewelry that had belonged to my grandmother, even old coins my father had collected. All things my mother had been told were lost or sold for medical bills. "She was planning for after," she said quietly as we cataloged the items. "After I died. She expected me to die first, caring for her. This was her retirement fund." The cruelty of it took my breath away. She'd been literally banking on her death, profiting from her sacrifice. Word spread through Lakewood like wildfire. Former friends who'd distanced themselves began reaching out to my mother. Neighbors who'd watched the ambulance take her away that night began stopping by with casseroles and offers of help. The community that Karen had convinced her didn't care was suddenly present, supportive, angry on her behalf. "I had no idea," became the common refrain. But of course, they'd had ideas. They'd just chosen the comfort of ignorance. I took a week off work to help coordinate Karen's move. Not out of kindness, but to ensure she actually left. She'd been assigned a social worker through the care facility, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia, who saw right through her attempts at manipulation. "Ms. Whitmore," she said during our planning meeting, "you're fortunate. Your caregiver could press criminal charges. Instead, she's ensuring you have safe placement and continued medical care. Many victims of elder abuse aren't so generous." "I'm the victim here," she tried, but even she seemed to know how hollow it sounded. Moving day arrived. Gray and drizzling, fitting weather for an ending. Dennis showed up with his truck. Guilt finally motivating action. Paul sent movers, but didn't come himself. Karen's belongings fit into depressingly few boxes: clothes, medications, a few personal items. The house had never really been her home, just her fortress. I stood on the porch watching them load her wheelchair into the truck. My mother was inside, unable or unwilling to witness her actual departure. But I needed to see it. Needed to watch her leave the way I'd been forced to leave all those years ago. "I hope you're satisfied," she said as Dennis wheeled her past me. Breaking up a community, destroying a dying woman. I looked at her. Really looked at her, shrunken, bitter, still unable to take responsibility, still the victim in her own narrative. "I am satisfied," I said honestly. Not happy, not celebrating, but satisfied that Mom is free, that the truth is known, that you're facing consequences for your choices. "What about forgiveness?" she asked. One last manipulation attempt. "Doesn't everyone deserve forgiveness?" "Forgiveness isn't mine to give," I said. "That's Mom's choice. But forgiveness doesn't mean escaping consequences. It doesn't mean continuing to harm others. It just means letting go of the anger. And honestly, I let go of my anger years ago. What's left is justice." Dennis helped her into the truck, avoiding my eyes. They'd barely pulled away when my mother appeared beside me, watching the tail lights disappear. "How do you feel?" I asked. She was quiet for a long moment. "Empty," she said finally. "But not bad. Empty. Like a house after you finally cleared out old clutter, ready for something new." We went inside together. The hospital equipment was gone. Donated to a medical supply charity. The living room looked bigger without Karen's chair dominating the space. Lighter, cleaner, free. That night, we ordered Chinese food, something Karen had always complained about. We ate at the kitchen table with the newspaper spread between us. But not the article about elder abuse, the real estate section. My mother was looking at condos, small places she could manage alone, fresh starts in neighborhoods without memories. "I can't stay here," she explained. "Too much history in these walls." I understood. Some houses could be redeemed. Others needed to be left behind. "There's something else," she said, pushing an envelope across the table from the safety deposit box. I think you should have it." Inside was a letter in my father's handwriting, dated a month before his death, addressed to me. "My dear Emily," it began. I couldn't read further. Not with my mother watching, not with emotions threatening to overwhelm me. But I clutched the letter. This unexpected gift from the past. "He loved you so much," my mother whispered. "I'm sorry I let Karen make you forget that. I'm sorry for all of it." "I know," I said. And I did. The anger was gone, replaced by something more complex. Not quite forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. She'd been a victim, too, in her own way. We'd both been caught in Karen's web, just playing different roles. My phone buzzed. A text from Aunt Diana. "Saw the movers leaving. You did it. Your dad would be so proud." Yes, I thought, fingering the letter. He would be. Not for the revenge, but for the rescue. For pulling my mother out of the darkness she'd been trapped in for 20 years. For showing her that she deserved better, even if she'd forgotten. The rain had stopped. Weak sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The house felt different already. Not happy yet, but no longer suffocating. Could breathe again. We all could. Tomorrow there would be lawyers and real estate agents and financial advisors. The work of rebuilding a life wasn't finished. But tonight, my mother and I sat in peaceful silence. No longer victims, no longer afraid. Karen was gone, and we were free. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. No dramatic gallery, no press corps, just a functional space where lives were legally dissected and reassembled. It was 3 months after Karen had left, and we were here for the final divorce hearing from the board and any remaining ties. She sat in a wheelchair on the opposite side, flanked by a court-appointed attorney. The care facility had done its job. She looked cleaner, properly medicated, but somehow smaller than ever. Her eyes found mine across the room, still holding that familiar rage. But it was muted now, like a fire burning out. My mother sat beside me, transformed. She'd gained weight, the healthy kind that came from actually eating regular meals. Her hair was styled differently, shorter, more modern. She wore a navy suit I'd helped her pick out, professional and dignified. But the biggest change was in her posture. She sat straight, shoulders back, no longer trying to disappear. "All rise," the bailiff announced, and Judge Patricia Hernandez entered. She was known for being fair but tough on financial abuse cases. Marcus had said we were lucky to draw her. The proceedings were surprisingly quick. Marcus presented our evidence methodically. The financial records, the APS report, the documented pattern of abuse spanning 2 decades. Karen's attorney made weak attempts to dispute some claims, but the evidence was overwhelming. Ms. Whitmore, Judge Hernandez said, looking directly at Karen, "In 23 years on the bench, I've rarely seen such a clear-cut case of financial exploitation. You systematically drained your caregiver's resources while maintaining hidden assets. You isolated her from family support. You created an environment of fear and dependence." Karen started to speak, but her attorney touched her arm, silencing her. "The divorce is granted," the judge continued. "All hidden assets are to be returned to Mrs. Parker immediately. The house remains her sole property. Ms. Whitmore, you are prohibited from contacting Mrs. Parker except through legal counsel. Any violation will result in criminal charges." The gavel came down. Just like that, 20 years of alliance were dissolved. Outside the courthouse, the March sun was bright, almost blinding after the fluorescent lights inside. My mother stopped on the steps, breathing deeply. "It's over," she said, wonder in her voice. "It's really over. The legal part is," I agreed. "The rest, rebuilding, healing, that takes time." She nodded, then surprised me by taking my hand. "Will you have lunch with me, as my daughter? Not my rescuer or my protector, just my daughter." It was the first time she'd acknowledged what we'd lost. Not just years, but the relationship itself. I squeezed her hand. "I'd like that." We went to a small cafe near the courthouse. Over soup and sandwiches, we really talked for the first time in 20 years. Not about Karen or the divorce or the house, but about small things, my job, her plans to take an art class, the book she'd started reading, normal mother-daughter conversations that felt foreign and precious. "I've been seeing a therapist," she admitted quietly. "Dr. Martinez gave me a referral. It's hard facing what I allowed, what I chose." "You were surviving," I said. "We both were, in different ways. But I was the adult, the parent. I should have protected you." "You should have," I agreed. There was no point in lying. "But you didn't. And we can't change that. We can only decide what comes next." She smiled sadly. "You're very wise. When did that happen?" "Therapy. Lots of therapy. And distance. Sometimes you need distance to see clearly." My phone buzzed. A text from Jake about a project deadline. The normal world. Still turning. Still demanding attention. But for once, I ignored it. "There's something else," my mother said, pulling out an envelope. "This came yesterday from the care facility." Inside was a single sheet of paper. Karen's shaky handwriting filling the page. I recognized the manipulation immediately, the self-pity, the blame-shifting, the conditional apologies. "I'm sorry you felt hurt." Not, "I'm sorry I hurt you." Classic Karen. "She wants me to visit," she said. "Says she's dying faster now alone. That I'm killing her with abandonment. Are you going to?" She took the letter back and without hesitation tore it into pieces. They fluttered onto the table like snow. "No," she said firmly. "I gave her 20 years. I won't give her another minute. It was the strongest I'd ever seen her. 2 weeks later, we were cleaning out the house for sale when the call came. Karen had passed in her sleep. Heart failure. Though the facility director said she'd been declining rapidly since the divorce, she kept saying her community had abandoned her. She told us, refused to accept that her actions had consequences. It was sad, really. She died angry. My mother hung up the phone and looked at me. I waited for tears, for guilt, for the old patterns to resurface. Instead, she just sighed. I feel relieved, she admitted. Is that terrible? It's honest, I said. And you're allowed to feel however you feel. The funeral was small. Dennis and Paul came out of obligation. A few people from the care facility attended. The pastor spoke generic words about forgiveness and peace, having never known the woman in the casket. My mother sat dry-eyed through the service, dignified in black, finally free of the weight she'd carried for 2 decades. I gave a eulogy not for Karen, but for the people we'd all been, for the community that might have existed in a different timeline, for the lessons learned through pain. I spoke about the importance of accountability, of breaking cycles, of choosing healing over revenge. Karen Whitmore was a complicated woman, I concluded. Her life serves as a reminder that our choices echo through generations, that harm done in private eventually comes to light, that true strength isn't in control or dominance, but in accountability and change. May we all learn from her mistakes. May we all do better. After the service, as people filed out, Paul's wife Margaret approached us. That was generous, she said. More than she deserved. Funerals aren't for the dead, I replied. They're for the living, and we needed to close this chapter properly. 6 months later, I stood in my mother's new condo, helping her hang pictures. The space was bright, modern, nothing like the dark house in Lakewood. She joined an art class, a book club, started volunteering at a women's shelter. At 63, she was building the life she'd never been allowed to have. I got a letter today, she said, pulling an envelope from a drawer. From a woman in my support group. Her daughter left 15 years ago. She wanted to know, how do you come back from that? How do you rebuild? What did you tell her? The truth that it starts with accountability, with facing what you've done, what you've allowed, that it's painful and slow and there are no guarantees. She paused. But that it's possible. We're proof it's possible. Looking at her there, surrounded by her new life, I felt the last of my anger dissolve. She wasn't the mother I'd needed at 18, but she was the mother I had now. Flawed and human and trying. Sometimes that's enough. I love you, Mom, I said, the words feeling rusty, but real. I love you too, Emily. And I'm sorry every day. I'm sorry. I know. And every day we get a little better. That night, driving back to Denver, I thought about cycles, about patterns passed down through generations, about the choices that break us and the ones that heal us. Karen was gone, but her legacy remained. Not in the pain she'd caused, but in the strength we'd found in surviving it. My phone rang. Dr. Martinez, checking in as she did periodically. How are you, Emily? I considered the question, watching the mountains fade into darkness outside my window. Free, I said finally. We're all finally free. And for the first time in 20 years, it was true. The past couldn't be changed. But it no longer held us captive. We'd faced our monster, exposed her to the light, and watched her shrink until she was just a sad, angry woman who died alone. The real revenge wasn't in her suffering. It was in our healing, in my mother's art classes and new friends, in my ability to trust, to connect, to stop running, in the relationship we were slowly rebuilding from the ashes of what Karen had burned. She'd wanted to destroy us. Instead, she'd forged us into something stronger. and that, more than any courtroom victory or financial settlement, was the ultimate triumph. The scared 18-year-old who'd run into the night was gone. The woman who'd returned seeking justice had evolved. What remained was someone who understood that revenge might feel satisfying, but redemption, messy, difficult, imperfect redemption, was what truly set you free. Thank you so much for listening to this story of pain, survival, and ultimately redemption. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss your thoughts on Emily's journey. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. And if you want more people to hear this powerful tale of overcoming HOA abuse and finding justice, please hit the hype button to help spread the story to those who might need to hear it. Your support means the world to us, and together we can help more people understand that it's never too late to break free from cycles of abuse. Thank you again, and until next time, stay strong.